Welcome into the Bear Squad Show. I'm Joe George, post-game host. Has free agency been a success this year for the Chicago Bears?
I'm Adam Sager. All three former Bears safeties signed one-year deals in Brisker, Byard, and Gardner Johnson. Should the Bears have made a move there?
And I'm Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears. You can hear that I'm sick and tired of all this Max Crosby talk.
Bear down, Chicago. It's the Bears Squad. Everything Chicago Bears, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Windy City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From Soldier Field to the next great chapter, the Bears Squad Show starts now.
Sometimes we throw out all the record books when this show starts, and we're throwing out with what we were leading with. We're leading with Max Crosby now, just for Lauren. I was kidding. What's up? Welcome into the Bears Squad Show here on the Locked On Bears YouTube and audio channels. Joe, Adam, and Lauren here with you. We'll discuss free agency. We'll talk about Max Crosby. I think this will be the end of the Max Crosby conversation after today, but we'll get through that. We'll go through all the signings that have happened since we did a show on Monday night, the players that have left, all three safeties signed deals elsewhere yesterday, and we'll talk about Kyler Murray and the other NFC North moves that have stood out to us so far in free agency. But, Adam, I'll start with you here on this one because we haven't talked free agency yet. But just as you look at it today, some big names like Coby Bryant, some depth pieces. But would you say that free agency has been a success so far for the Bears?
I think if you look at the defensive side of the ball, adding Bryant and Devin Bush and bringing back DeMarco Jackson, I think gives you a lot more speed. And that's the word you keep hearing when you hear the Bears talk is speed on defense. And, none of those guys that left, the three safeties, really brought that much speed to the defense. So I think you can tell that Dennis Allen was definitely just working with what he had last year. And now he's looking to get his type of players in. Overall, it feels like free agency's been kind of light for the Bears. But I think they're still heading in the right direction, and we'll see what happens with the draft. And there's still some signings that can be made here over the next few weeks or month and a half, whatever it is, till the draft.
Yeah, the word success there is the imperative one there, because how do you define that? Because there have been so many off seasons where the Bears win free agency because they made all the big splash moves, and it was that running joke, right, that the Bears are the offseason champions every year, and then it doesn't lead to any sort of in-season success. So I can't help but go into this offseason feeling like, yeah, well, they certainly haven't won free agency this year, but that hasn't been much of an indicator of how much better they're going to do the following season. So I think they've been successful in avoiding bad contracts that can get them into trouble the way that Dio Dangbo and Grady Jarrett did last season. I think that has been successful, but is the overall talent on the roster better today than it was, 6 months ago? I'm not sure. When you lose DJ Moore and Drew Dahlman and replace them with Khalif Raymond and Garrett Bradbury, those are downgrades on that side of the ball. And defensively, I think Coby Bryant is an upgrade at safety, but Cam Lewis, I think he's a better scheme fit. But in terms of talent, it says the combination of Coby Bryant and Cam Lewis better than Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker. Better scheme fits, yes. Better overall talent. This is still going to come down to the NFL draft, right? For the roster to be better right now than it is last year comes down to the draft, and they're going to need their defensive versions of Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, Ozzie Trapillo with three of their first picks. If they can get, and that's high expectations, but if they can get those kinds of players to kind of fill in the remaining need for talent, then I think we can start to feel like there was some real progress made. But we knew this offseason a lot of the progress would just be guys coming back and keeping the ship together a little bit and getting better in natural development. So it's kind of a weird success. I think so, but it doesn't feel like they've accomplished much yet.
So I'm right there with you. It feels like they've checked a lot of the boxes that you've wanted them to check in free agency, but it still feels like there's also more to happen that you need. I don't know I don't know if the second safety with Cam Lewis is what my expectations were. I was expecting a better player. I'm still hopeful that there is another safety that they're going to bring in to at least add some competition there and then plus into the draft. So I think it's not just a Jonathan Owens like player that you would bring back and just be a special teams guy. I think they need to add more to the safety room, but their scheme, the speed that you guys are talking about, those are all positives. It's kind of nice that the Bears aren't one of those teams seeing the Raiders back-to-back go Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean within 2 minutes of each other, it's like that's a lot of money you invest in your linebacker room for questionable players. So I think it has been successful so far, but it hasn't been one where, it's, the Bears are going to win the Super Bowl this year because of what they did in free agency.
Yeah,
Adam,
I was just going to say, I think I like the depth pieces they got at defensive tackle. They're not starters, and I think the Bears know that. You're going to see a draft pick that's a defensive tackle. I think one thing we're seeing is, Dennis Allen likes those smaller, faster type defensive tackles and getting rid of Andrew Billings and, you bring in Street and Gallimore. It's just you're getting a lot smaller, and it kind of makes me question early in the draft, will they go after one of those bigger defensive tackles that we've talked about, the Lee Hunter, the Caden McDonald, those type of guys? It just doesn't seem like it anymore. So then you kind of change your expectations when you're looking at the draft and what they could be thinking there.
Lauren, how are you feeling about the safety position? Like, do you like what they did outside of Coby Bryant? Like, what do you want to see next from Ryan Poles there?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think Cam Lewis is a really fun, intriguing scheme fit, and it's just been a question of like, how big of a role do they envision him in? And I imagine they might not even have a specific one in mind yet, that he could do a number of things. I think he has the flexibility and versatility to say, if they need him to be their starting strong safety this season, he is capable of doing so. Is he a high-level starting strong safety? Probably not, but can he get the job done and do what Dennis Allen needs him to do? Absolutely. But also, he's not so expensive that if you draft a safety early, he could be the backup there. He could be a backup in the slot. If you have an injury, if Kyler Gordon's hurt again this season, he could be your starting slot cornerback in injury relief. Or he can kind of be that dime third safety defensive back if you draft a safety early and have a guy there. But I think he just gives them the flexibility that, yes, you need to draft a safety, but whether it's the first round, the second round, the third round, or the fourth round, it's not as imperative that it has to be early, because you feel like Cam Lewis is you're in a pinch, can be your good starter, but also you hope that you can get a rookie that can, again, like we talked about earlier, have that like Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, Ozzie Trapillo level impact of like, he's a starter right away, even if, you'll live with some rookie growing pains with that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with the safety position. I think they still bring in somebody depth-wise, if it's a Jonathan Owens type guy, just, to go along with Elijah Hicks and keep that depth that they have at the position. But yeah, I think when you talk draft, you're looking at guys kind of like they brought in speed, versatility, and that's what Dennis Allen likes. He likes guys that can flip, strong safety, free safety. He don't really care. He just wants two safeties out there that can kind of do everything. And there's definitely plenty of guys in this draft that I think can fill that role. And then it's just a matter of, can they get them to go quick and be that starter? So I think that's what will really determine leading into the season at the safety position.
I want to hit on one draft thing real quick before we go back into free agency, because this news came out last night. I think it was about Caleb Banks. Broke his foot at the combine. Had a broken foot in college as well. And Adam, you mentioned defensive tackle there at 25 for the Bears. Is this a player that you're very hesitant about now knowing this is another foot injury for him? And because now it feels like he really could be there for the Bears at 25 with a second injury like this.
Yeah, it worries me that he was just kind of doing some drills and he broke his foot. And it's not the first time, like you mentioned. So while I love the player and his traits, the injuries and not being on the field at Florida scares the hell out of me. And to be honest, I don't know that there's a first round defensive tackle right now that I'm looking at unless somebody falls. I don't know that Peter Woods gets to them. I don't know how he fits Dennis Allen's, I think he fits it right. I think he's good there, but do you wait? There's definitely guys in the second and third round that I think fit better, but maybe just don't have the big high upside of some of these bigger defensive tackles that I don't think Dennis Allen will like for his scheme.
The complicating thing with Caleb Banks' injury too is like when the broken foot happens during on-field drills, they've already done medicals at that point, right? So it's not like, I don't know how that works at the combine, if they can like have him do medicals again after the drill since he's already there, or do they have him go through everything and meet with doctors and stuff, and then he breaks his foot on top of that. Like that just muddies the water quite a bit more than had he come in with the injury and been unable to perform.
I wonder if it's something where like his agent can get the scans or, the x-rays and all that stuff and just send it to all the teams so they have it. And, he doesn't even have to worry about it if he does a visit somewhere. They don't have to worry about any of that. It's already out there.
Yeah, you would kind of think so, right? Like the agent would have to make sure that so that way each team is not having to do medicals every time. You can focus on an actual, visit of finding out what's going on, what this player is like. Is there anything else in free agency that the Bears need to do? Khalif Raymond, a wide receiver, special teams guy, comes in. I don't know if that screams third wide receiver for me for this roster with Jade Walker. So, Lauren, is wide receiver a position you're still looking at, or any spots on this roster where you're like, they still need to do this, and whether it's depth or a starter kind of player?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one is number 3 tight end still, just because Ben Johnson uses them plenty, and I'm perfectly fine with them letting Durham Smythe walk, and I imagine he'll go get I'm still expecting Shane Zylstra, the number 3 tight end from Detroit, who's a free agent. Would make a lot of sense to just cheap guy that you plug in here that knows the system. But that's the main one. I throw backup center in there, but they might just view Luke Newman as that true plan. And you could also still draft a guy. So like, especially if Amagaji is going to play guard and McFadden's going to play guard, then you could have Newman play center and kind of fill all your holes that way. But the one thing I haven't been able to shake is like, we went in this offseason saying you have to make defensive line and pass rush a priority. You have to make a concerted effort to upgrade that. And it's very clear that the plan to do so is the NFL draft, but I don't necessarily love the idea of like feeling like I have to upgrade this position in the NFL draft. Like part of what made Luther Burden and Colston Loveland such great draft picks was that those were not positions the Bears had to take, that they were able to just let the board fall to them and say, oh yeah, tight end is just the best player that's here at 10. Don't need one, but we'll take one and you get a superstar player. And then in the second round, like, don't need a wide receiver, but there's just one on the board here that we absolutely love. So we're going to take him. And it feels a little bit different than like, oh, we need a defensive tackle and here's the best one who's available right now. Or we need an edge rusher. Here's the best one who's available right now. But like, I would hate for them. I mean, hate strong word, but like, it would be less than ideal if they're sitting there in the first round and say there's a great, I don't know, like linebacker or cornerback or something sitting there, but you just feel like we got to get an edge rusher or a defensive tackle. I mean, we think maybe in that position they would just take the best player available, but then okay, in the second round, then you have to take, eventually you're going to have to force yourself to take one of these players at one of these positions. And I wish they had been able to go into the draft feeling a little bit more like, no, we made some upgrades there and we could add a draft pick. But instead, now the draft pick feels like it's going to have to be the upgrade. But I can also understand that there wasn't a lot of salary cap space available to do this, and not an overly strong free agent class to be able to do this either, in terms of guys who were young and fit the scheme and fit your price tag and stuff. So I feel like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth when I say, hey, good on them for not spending a bunch of money in free agency, but also wish they would have spent a bunch of money in free agency at this position of need.
Well, yeah, it's just because it's such a glaring weakness, all throughout the season. We talked every single game about the pass rush, and now you're just kind of dependent on a rookie and a Dangbo to come back healthy. But that's where we sit. And I think it was interesting. You were talking about pick 25 and kind of forcing that. I mean, a guy that I think could fall now, especially how he did his pro day yesterday, is Mekhi Lemon. What if he falls and sits there? I mean, if he doesn't remind you of Amon-Ra, they're very, very similar. Size, speed, the way they run their routes, everything. And that was Ben's favorite target in Detroit. If he's sitting there at 25, what's going to stop Ben from being like, defensive end can wait. We got a guy here. Now we got 3. Now Raymond becomes your 4 and pushes everybody down. And we have 3 young, exciting wide receivers. I mean, I could see something like that play out. Or do they go safety at 25 if the Eneman or the kid from Toledo is sitting there? I mean, there's so many different avenues they can take because they still have holes. But I still feel like Ben Johnson / Ryan Poles may like that best player available. And if it's a guy like Mekhi Lemon sitting there, they may just take him and figure the rest out later.
So like, not to keep on this draft thing, but like if we go in this draft and okay, they got 2 seconds and a third and a fourth, right? And they get an edge rusher in the second round and a D tackle in the third round. Like, is that going to feel like defensive line has been upgraded. I mean, it's better than nothing, right? So I mean, literally
Right.
it's an upgrade because it's new players that they invested some kind of draft picks in. But like, is that going to feel like enough? Like, but then what is enough, right? A first and a second round pick at those spots. Like, is that? And I mean, probably,
Right.
but what's the threshold there of like, all right, you've used both second round picks in the D line, everyone's happy, or I don't know where the line is.
Yeah, I think it's something Bears fans are going to kind of have to just swallow and just say, hey, this is what it is this year. And we can try and figure some stuff out. Maybe there's a trade back and they pick up an extra pick. Maybe, everyone seems to be compiling picks for next year because the draft looks so much deeper next year. Maybe they trade back and pick up something for next year. I mean, we'll just see which way they go. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think Bears fans are going to be happy either way. Let's put it that way.
No, I tend to agree. I think when you look at free agency and then you go into the draft and go, okay, this defensive line is not much better. It's essentially the same. And that Ryan Poles can talk as much as he wants about all these guys improving and being healthier next year, and that's going to make it better. And he can sell us that. He's trying his hardest to. It feels like so far every time he meets with the media. But I don't think anyone really believes that the Bears defensive line has been upgraded. And yeah, Lauren, I think it's a great question of just like, is spending 2 of your first 3 picks on defensive line, is that going to satisfy Bears fans? I think it will for now. It's just going to be, what does it look like in the season? What does it look like when we see Odengo out there? Like how do the rookies impact it? Or is it just going to be the entire story again of the season where it's like, they got no pass rush again on this roster?
And I do think it also depends a little bit, fair or not, on which defensive lineman it is. Like, I can imagine if they say they pick Peter Woods at the first round pick, Bears fans are going to be like, they got a defensive tackle who had 2 sacks last year. Well, this isn't upgrading the defensive line. What's Ryan Poles doing? Like, depending on the player, they're going to look at quick numbers. Like, whereas, like, if it's like Akeem Mesidor, they're going to be like, oh, wow, look at this fun pass rusher that the Bears got. So I think it just kind of depends on the perception wise. It's going to depend on who the player is.
And I know that's kind of turned into a draft thing, but there's reports saying now that teams have taken Mesidor off their board completely due to some injury stuff. So, I mean, that's another pass rusher that could be nixed off the Bears board. And then you see guys have to move up, or I don't know. It seems like to me, the more I look at things, the sweet spot for, I think, Dennis Allen types in both defensive end and defensive tackle are at that 57 and 60 pick. There seems to be guys that just fit what they need and the mold of what Dennis Allen likes in that range is where things stand right now. Now we know the draft is crazy and you could get a guy late rising and jump from 65 to 30. So it all depends on how that plays out. But as things stand right now, you look at all the mock drafts and everything, I think the sweet spot is there right at the end of that second round.
All right, let's take our first break here, and then let's talk about those draft picks. They're still going to have them? Are the Bears backing on Max Crosby? Should they be? Our reaction as well to the news when it came down. We'll get to all of that next here on the Bears Squad Show. Today's episode of the Bears Squad Show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, let's start with reaction. Max Crosby, he's a Raven, and all of a sudden, he's not. My first reaction was, Ian Rappaport put the tweet out from the Raiders. I went right to the Raiders Twitter account. They hadn't tweeted it yet. So it reminded me of Luka in a way where I was like, is this real? Like, is this a real thing that's actually happening right now? Or like, did Ian Rappaport get hacked and this is a thing? But then the Raiders put the statement out. Everyone confirms it. The Ravens have backed out of the deal. Max Crosby is back in Las Vegas, and it starts to add the questions. But Lauren, just your reaction first when you saw the news happen that Max Crosby's trade was getting an edit undo from Baltimore.
Yeah, it was kind of a oh, here we go again kind of thing. Like, it was nice to kind of put it to rest and say, all right, yeah, the Bears kicked the tires, and okay, now he's gone, and we can move on with the rest of our offseason. But now it's like, crap. Now this returns into the news cycle again. And don't get me wrong, it's fun to speculate about. And now, with him going back to the Raiders, probably do you think the trade price comes back down, and all of a sudden the Bears do come back in the conversation? Like, it's not to say that it was like a total like waste of air to talk about it being a second chance opportunity for sure, but like also felt like a kind of like a too little too late thing, where it's like, okay, he's available now, but Ryan Poles already signed 5-6 free agents and occupied most of his cap space, and has occupied a certain amount of, like, he had a plan for the offseason and has now gone down that plan's path. And I have to imagine that had his Max Crosby alternate plan would have included a different set of free agents that he might have pursued had he been able to get Max Crosby at a price that was more appropriate in his mind. And so once you've already started going down this alternate path, it made me feel like, well, all right, he's back to the Raiders, but I still don't feel like this is a super real possibility for the Bears at this point, because Poles just doesn't seem like one who's going to veer off of that plan that he had already started down with the other free agent signings. But I was more worried like what the ripple effects were. If the Raiders start canceling some of their contracts and the Ravens start canceling some of their contracts, could that get the Bears back in some other free agents? Like that's kind of where my brain first went.
Yeah, I'm right there with Lauren. I thought, I was shocked, first of all, when I saw it. It was something, nobody was expecting. I was kind of happy when he went to Baltimore because I didn't want the Bears to trade multiple first-round picks for him, being 29, coming off a serious knee injury, and the fact that, the Packers just traded 2 1s for Micah Parsons. I don't put them on the same level as a defensive player. I just don't at this point in Max Crosby's career. But then, I started thinking immediately, okay, will the Bears get back in? Will the Cowboys get back in? I think they came out pretty quick saying, no, we're good. And I thought it was interesting that they came out really quick and said, like, we're sticking with Rashawn Gary and all the moves we've made so far in free agency, because their doctor of their team, Cooper, got to see. He was one of the doctors that was involved in the Max Crosby knee situation there in Baltimore. They brought him in to check it out and give his thoughts and opinions on it. So the fact that Dallas backed out that quick, I think kind of took me even more so to, all right, Bears just need to stay their plan, stay their course. No need to spend, even if it was a first and second round pick, kind of worried me, because then you got to, he's got all that money. Now you got to account for that. So I was happy when he went to Baltimore, a little worried, I guess would be the word, that the Bears would jump back in. And we've seen Ryan Poles give up a lot of draft capital for players that maybe aren't worth quite what they give up for. So I was afraid he's going to jump right back in and be like, yeah, we'll give you our 1-1 and let's be done with it. And we'll pass them. We got no problem. So that was my reaction to it.
Do you guys have is there any scenario now in which you go, okay, it makes sense for the Bears to get back in? Like my first thought was, I'm not doing this until draft day if there was going to be a move, because then you have, your 2029 first, but I would protect the hell out of that thing. I would find a way to make it, hey, this is a first round pick, but if he plays less than half of his games over the duration of his current contract, it falls into a 6th or a 2nd or a 3rd round pick, and it falls back. Like, trying to protect yourself from the medical concerns, because I still think it's going to take the first this year and something if people want to get back in on Max Crosby. And I know they've said he's a Raider now. He said he's a Raider. I mean, maybe it just plays out that way. Like, we've seen things like this happen in sports before, where trades don't go through and everyone ends up very happy and it just works out. But is there a price, Lauren, where you go, okay, I am interested in now on Max Crosby if they can make it work salary-wise?
I mean, there's always a price, but I don't think there's a price that the Raiders would agree to, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, I don't think they're bluffing entirely when they say, we'll just keep him and use him. Like, it's not like we all know they have to get rid of him, and so they're going to take whatever they can get. Like, there is a real possibility here that they just stick with it and roll and say, hey, he's a good player and we'll keep a good player. I think they would prefer to move on from him, but they're not forced to move on for him. So they have enough leverage to say, yeah, we're not just going to take some low ball offer that I would be willing to offer. And I still do wonder, like, if this ends up being more like a Micah Parsons timeline or a Khalil Mack timeline, where it happens right before the start of the regular season, as opposed to this time of year where somebody's getting ready for week one and they either have an injury or they just feel a little bit of that desperation and say, like, feel kind of like Green Bay last year. I wouldn't say desperation, but they just feel like, wow, we really like our team right now. And if we could just make that one last minute splash addition to put us over the top, then, like, once they've gone through free agency, once they've seen their NFL draft picks actually come to training camp and they can feel like, oh, wow, this roster is just that one Khalil Mack, Micah Parsons piece away. Like, I suspect that might be where the Max Crosby trade ends up happening. I don't suspect that the Chicago Bears will be that team that sees all their things come together and say, we're just one Max Crosby piece away. I think if it was going to happen, it was going to be early in this process so Poles could kind of build the offseason around it. But I think he's a little bit too, like, in a good way, he's too focused on the current plan to try and deviate that in such a big way to Crosby to say, well, we were planning on everything going this way, but now we're going to throw that all aside to get this guy in there. Like, I'd be surprised, barring, like, if Montez Sweat has an injury in training camp or something, like anything like that could change the math here a little bit. But if things are steady and about as predictable as you could hope, then I still think the Bears never fully get back in on this.
Yeah, I think it, like he said, there's always a price, but the Raider, if you come and say, oh, give me a second and a third, okay, now we're talking. Now we're figuring some stuff out. But, if it starts with a first, I don't think the Bears, with the upcoming contracts that they have to give out, can afford to give up draft picks for a guy that is going to be making 30 plus million and is going to be 30 in just a year from now. So I think it's something that, this is where good teams, when it comes to this kind of stuff, avoid these type of deals with older free agents. Now, I get it when you go and get Khalil Mack or you go get Micah Parsons, something like that. But when it's where Max Crosby is now, coming off the injury like he is, I think Ryan Poles knows that it just doesn't make sense at this moment.
Last thing on this, we'll hit on. I'm just curious, Lauren, your thoughts. Are we having this conversation again next year? If Crosby gets through the season healthy, and then you can say, okay, it didn't bite him this year. We still see the long-term concerns about these X-rays and MRIs and everything. But do you feel like this is just a conversation that is going to resurface a lot of next offseason as well?
I think it will resurface in some form, but whether that's Max Crosby or another edge rusher, like, there's going to be that talk. I mean, unless the Bears nail their first round pick with some or second round pick with some edge rusher that has a Luther Burden, Colston Loveland level impact. And then it's like, okay, well, no longer a need, but we can all kind of predict that edge rusher may continue to be a need for this Bears team. And then by next year, Max Crosby's price tag comes down a little bit because he's a little bit older, but also his salary cap number lowers in 2027 and 2028 and 2029 a little bit. So, like, he becomes more affordable, but also a year older. So in theory, the draft capital you have to give up is a little bit smaller. And also the Bears window for winning is a little bit more immediate too. Like, part of that, Ryan Poles says, right, we want to have sustainable success here. And so I think they want to, like, see how it goes again in 2026 and make sure that they are sustaining that success before they make more of a splash move for the present, and thinking that it would take less future assets to get Crosby at that point. I think it will be a conversation again, but I wonder if it's not also a conversation about any number of other potential pass rushers that by then could be unhappy or available. I mean, the Steelers still have to figure out what they're going to do between Max with TJ Watt in the future there. Like, I think this is going to keep repeating itself every offseason until the Bears have that weakness fully solved. And as of today, that's not the case.
Let me throw something at you guys that I've seen. And, I wondered if the Bears would maybe sniff around and see. We saw Josh Sweat request a trade from the Arizona Cardinals. Had 12 sacks last year. Fits that mold of the really big, tall, bulky defensive ends at 6'5", 265 is what he's listed at. I mean, is that something you could see the Bears jumping into if, and we'll see if he's traded before the draft, but maybe that's a draft day or after the draft type move where you say, okay, we didn't quite get what we wanted. We can financially make it work with some moves with the cap and stuff. Maybe go get Josh Sweat for, I don't know what it would take to get him, a second or a third, something along those lines.
I'd be open to it, honestly. Like I'm not, it's not at the top of my list of players. Like I think I think we talked about this before. I don't think the Vikings would trade Grenard to the Bears, but like Grenard still to me is the one that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. But I would be open to Sweat, especially if there was a way to get to not include a first. Like I would be very open to. I would think Arizona's going to try to get one with just what the price was supposed to be for Max Crosby. They would think that they have some validity to ask for at least one first-round pick. But I would be open to Sweat for sure, honestly.
Yeah, and Sweat's on such a team-friendly contract right now too. Like that, I think he's going to have some value if they do even, go as far as like him requesting a trade. It's very different than the Cardinals listening to trade offers and being willing to actually trade him in this. Like he'd have to make it a mess. But yeah, for sure. Like either of the Bears second round picks, I would be more than willing to give up. Give up a second for Montez Sweat. I think I'd be willing to do more than the same for Josh Sweat. And then this feels like something that could be a draft day situation too, where either if Arizona's on the board and there's a great edge rusher that they can get to replace him and say, okay, now we feel more comfortable moving him, or vice versa. If the Bears get through the first round and they're like, we don't like what the edge rusher class looks like from here, or we don't like our projections that they're probably not going to be there when we're picking at 57, like that could be enough to kind of spur some action there. So yeah, definitely a player I would kick the tires on, largely because the contract is so friendly and you're flexible to be able to get out of it, that you're not trading for this guy and stuck with him until he's 32. Like you can keep him for as long as he's good, but then you can get out of it as pretty much whenever you want after this season. So it's like 1 year and then team options from there is exactly what you're looking for in terms of building a sustainable thing that can win, that you're not just locked into forever.
All right, let's take our next break here. Let's talk about the guys who left. A bunch of players from the Bears 2025 team signed in free agency elsewhere yesterday. 4 defensive backs. Actually, we'll go through those, and we'll get a question here we'll get to as well here in the YouTube comments. Let's get to all of that next here on the Bears Squad Show.
This episode of the Bears Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. College basketball is nonstop this time of year. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can boost any kind of college hoops parlay you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever you want, mixing spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season, especially through the conference tournaments. It's time for somebody to get hot and go all the way to the top. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
All right, guys. Well, 4 guys leave yesterday in free agency. But before we get there, we got this question here in the comments. So much has happened with the Bears, this free agency. Did they overall get better, worse, or stay the same? I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, but as you look at this roster right now, Adam, I'll start with you. Is it better, worse, or is it kind of the same, the Chicago Bears?
I mean, I think overall, I think the offense has taken a little bit of a step back with Dahlman and Moore gone. But you also expect Burden and Loveland to get even better. Caleb to make everybody to take a next step in year 2 of Ben Johnson's offense. And then I think the defense, in my opinion, has gotten better. While maybe they don't have the all the spots filled yet, I think I like what they're doing for Dennis Allen's scheme better than just say, oh, these guys are only signing 1-year deals. Let's just bring them all back and run it back again. I think so. It's something along those lines where I think defense is better, offense is worse. So I guess I'll just say the same.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there with you step for step. I mean, I'm not sure how much better the defense is. I mean, I think it is better, but it's not, noticeably better here. But I also think free agency is not going to be the perfect time to take this temperature, right? Like that. If you think about so much of what made the Bears good last season, it wasn't the free agents that they signed, right? I mean, it was mostly the draft picks and the guys they traded for. And you could throw Drew Dahlman in there as like the one shining free agent example of someone they brought in, with significant intentions to be good and was good. I mean, they got Nashawn Wright in free agency, I guess, but we didn't leave free agency saying, wow, Nashawn Wright has upgraded the Bears cornerback room here. So I try not to get too caught up in like, if on March 13th, the Bears roster isn't a ton better than it was on March 9th or whatever, I guess when March 6th before free agency started. I don't think it's time to panic or be overly concerned just yet, but it's totally fair to be underwhelmed and feel like, they kind of just replaced some guys that left and filled some holes that were existing, but didn't really like make that like big addition, right? It was much more like filling things that were already being lost than it was like adding something that you didn't already have before. Like there's not really that new outside player that like, oh, they added some extra talent or depth here. It was like, no, they replaced this, replaced that. Maybe those replacements are better, but it's just kind of filling the same holes that were already left open.
And the one thing real quick is that, you replace these guys, but you couldn't do anything big because of the free agent deals you made last year with Dio Adangbo and Grady Jarrett. And that's what's hindering you this offseason. And Bears fans are pissed they're not doing anything, but it's like, you got to look back to free agency last year where they tried and it didn't work out. And we'll see, maybe those guys come back and play well this year. Who knows? But what we saw last year and those two guys should tell Bears fans like, hey, we don't need to go make splashes in free agency. Get the guys that fit the defense or the offense and let's go. And then you add in your draft picks and hopefully that adds to the core of Williams and Burden and Loveland and, some of the younger guys, Jalen Johnson on defense.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point too, that I think maybe has been assumed a lot this offseason, but I haven't heard a lot of people say it out loud, right? Like a big part of why the Bears don't have salary cap space right now is those two contracts. And it's like, well, what do you mean? They were here last year and they're here this year. Why do they have less cap space? But like they were backloaded contracts, right? I mean, last year, Dio Adangbo, and they cost you $8 million against the salary cap. Now it's at like 20. And I don't remember what Grady Jarrett's cap number was last year, but I think it was below $10 million. And now he costs you 18. So it's like, because I was thinking about this where it's like, well, the Bears got to go all in while Caleb Williams is still on a cheap rookie contract. They should have tons of cap space. And it's like, well, wait a minute, where did all their salary cap space go? But it's like the guys that you already had under contract from last year have more than doubled in price for this season compared to last season. So that ate up a bunch of your space. And then you do have some dead money from trading DJ Moore. So that's $12 million that's sitting out there that can't go to help get you better players elsewhere. And so like, it's just kind of all this like little things of contracts tolling and getting more expensive because they kind of backloaded them a little bit last season, which in hindsight, you kind of scratch your head and go, it wasn't like they were going all in on winning last year. Like I realize cap space was limited. It always has some limitations, but like, man, why did they backload Odangbo and Grady Jarrett so much? Why were they trying to save so much money in the first year? I think they were expecting Odangbo to just get better and then be more worth it in year two, but Grady Jarrett's a little harder to explain in that regard.
Yeah, he was $7 million last year.
So more than double. It's like,
yes, more than double, almost double and a half.
That's brutal. All right. So yesterday we saw CJ Gardner-Johnson 1 year, $6 million to the Bills. Jaquan Brisker 1 year, $5.5 million to the Steelers. Kevin Byard, a $9 million deal to the Patriots. Nashawn Wright, $5.5 million to the Jets. So 4 members of the Bears secondary all signed 1 year deals, all less than $10 million. Adam, were any of those guys, and when you saw the deals play out, of like, maybe the Bears should have kind of been in that mix and kept one of these guys?
I think the only guy I'd say is Byard. I think he's, a leader on defense, but I'm not, crying over losing Kevin Byard to free agency. None of the other three. I mean, let's face it, this defensive backfield, and yeah, part of it was the pass rush as well, but they weren't very good last year. They gave up a ton of yards. And yes, did they make splash plays? Sure. Yes. I mean, Wright and Byard with all the interceptions was fun to watch last year. But overall, they don't fit the speed aspect that Dennis Allen wants. And Ben Johnson wants. They don't fit the type of defense they're trying to play. None of them. And Nashawn Wright, I mean, can you guarantee me he's going to give me 6-7 picks again next year? No. I mean, we'll see what he does. Where'd he end up? The Jets?
The Jets, yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to get burned by DJ Moore in like week 1.
Yeah, good luck there. I mean, they didn't have an interception last year, so maybe he can actually get them one this next season. But yeah, Brisker, I mean, good luck to you. He was a fun player while he was here, but I don't think those type of safeties really fit in the NFL anymore. where you just are a box safety. That's it. So, I mean, none of the four guys, if I had to pick one, it would be Byard. I think him and Bryant together would be good, but I think you can do better by going and getting a rookie and bringing him in and letting him play, especially if you get the right guy.
Yeah, the money does really talk there, right? Like Byard's the one who got a significant salary. Like, yeah, he's the one I would have liked to have back too. But we kind of talked about trying to piece together his value, and it's tough when it's a 1-year deal. You can't necessarily move the money around to make it fit under the Bears cap conveniently. Like you just whatever that on that one you do, that's what you got to pay him. You can't backload that or push the money in the future the way that they did with Coby Bryant and even Cam Lewis and Devin Bush. Like they all have lower year one salary cap hits because the Bears have so much more cap space in the future when they can get out of Dio Dengbo and Grady Jarrett's contracts. The other one I would at least put in this conversation is CJ Gardner-Johnson, only because it was reported 1 year worth up to $6 million, which is always a very sneaky agent talk.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of incentives in there that he absolutely could earn $6 million. But like, I suspect they haven't reported what the base number is going to be there. I would bet it's less than 3. It's like $2.5-3 million with, up to $3 million in incentives. And like, I would have considered that just because he is a good fit for what Dennis Allen likes to do. I mean, I know we all remember him getting smoked at times against Green Bay, but I do think as like a backup who can play some safety and some slot and do a little bit of everything, good blitzer, aggressive in the running game. Like I figured he would want to go somewhere where he'd have a better opportunity for more playing time, that he might just not want to come back here to be purely a backup. But like at that price, if the base number there is pretty affordable, I would have considered pulling the trigger there, but perfectly fine letting Deshaun Wright and Jaquan Brisker go, even on contracts that are much more affordable. And you wouldn't have been totally mad if the Bears had signed him to those deals, but you're not kicking yourself like, oh man, why didn't they do that? It's like, it's fair value for them. They have their own significant question marks, and that's a good price for given those question marks, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable about exploring other options instead.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys, right? I mean, Byard would have been the one. CJ Gardner-Johnson comes in at 2. I will say I'm a little surprised about the Brisker contract. I thought he would get a little more than that, honestly. I know there's some concussion history, obviously, but I thought maybe he would be at least a 2-year deal with someone in the NFL. So that surprised me more. I was like, that's not what I expected. And Deshaun Wright, I think, people were pumping him up going to free agency of like, he's doing a big contract. And it's like, no. If you actually watch the games, it's, what he is. He's an interception machine, yes, but there's also a lot of bad play out there.
He's the guy you wish you would have been like, yeah, we'll give you a 2-year deal, and then you have him under contract, and you can look to trade him at his peak value. Like, that's the type of guy you want there. So, yeah, I thought it was interesting. Byard did come out after he signed with the Patriots and said it was between the Bears and the Patriots, and, it was staying with the defense where he just had so much success at his position this past year, or going back to Mike Vrabel and playing under his defense again for a team that was just in the Super Bowl and needs help in that secondary. So I think, it showed that the Bears were interested, because we heard all the polls talking about Kevin Byard so much leading up to free agency that, they were still in it. And you can say like they probably gave their best shot, and maybe it just didn't hit the 9 million. But I'm definitely with you, Lauren. I did kind of forget about CJ Gardner-Johnson. I would have brought him back at that kind of price just for depth. But if he wanted more of a starting role, then the Bears couldn't guarantee that.
I think the bigger factor here for me in all of this conversation is that I was expecting not necessarily that the Bears would get a bunch of compensatory picks, but that Deshaun Wright would get a big enough contract to sway the compensatory pick formula, and Jaquan Brisker would get a big enough contract that as Ryan Poles goes in with a more restrained, kind of slow and steady free agent approach, a couple of decent sized contracts to Coby Bryant and Devin Bush, but for the most part, not handing out huge deals. Like if Deshaun Wright had gotten a big multi-year contract and Brisker had gotten a big multi-year contract, like you could start. I mean, I'm not a compensatory pick formula expert at all, but like you could start to work your way towards maybe getting some extra pick between everybody else that has signed elsewhere in free agency. Like they've been willing to let a number of guys walk. Byard as well would play into that formula, and maybe they still could get like a 7th or something on this. I mean, I really don't know what the math looks like on it right now, but it hurts them a lot in that formula that those guys didn't get bigger contracts. And it probably speaks to the league-wide opinion of these players being a lot lower than we might have thought they would be leaving Chicago.
Yeah, I saw and I can't remember exactly when I saw it, but at one point in the last couple days. Now this might have been before all those guys signed, because they all signed like, it felt like it was like minute by minute they were all signing, like they had a plan, like we're just gonna do this all together. So I want to say it was before, but at that point the Bears didn't have any, but per a guy who does a lot of that for, I think it was for ESPN, says that they didn't have any. So maybe now with those 1-year deals, maybe they get a 7th. I'm not sure.
I'm looking at the over the cap has like a live compensatory pick sort of
Okay.
loose calculator, and like Byard's current contract would be worth a 6th. Brisker's would be worth a 6th, and Wright would be worth a 7th. But Bush negates a 6th. Coby Bryant negates a 5th, and then Gallimore technically negates a 7th as a 5th round pick too. So yeah, they are not in
right now.
Not in good math right now to get compensatory picks here. But had those been bigger, maybe there's a chance the math overweighs it.
Well, and remember also, Joe, we talked about it last week. There was kind of this like beacon of hope that was thrown out there by Courtney Cronin about the picks for Ian Cunningham. Like, she's like, if I had to guess, the Bears will get those picks. And then they came out and it was nothing. And all Bears fans got all mad all over again about it. Chicago radio went nuts.
They're not the only ones. I don't know if you saw the Ryan Poles quote where you just said, I'll leave that alone right now, when he was asked about the picks. So like, obviously, like, that's going to be a big discussion.
Thought they were going to get them.
Yeah, like the Bears are gonna, I hate to use the word tantrum. They're gonna make their voices heard at the owners' meeting, and I think Ryan Poles is gonna have much more to say than at the owners and GMs meetings later this summer when they figure out why it happened, what the reasoning is behind this is. But yeah, you very short with the media yesterday when he was asked about it.
And I imagine his voice will be well heard when you have a GM of color talking about how we didn't get compensation for another GM of color. And there's going to be a lot of NFL owners who are afraid of being accused of being racist in any kind of way in response to this. And Roger Goodell, anything, accused of any kind of racism from the NFL. Like, I think there's going to be not that the Bears are going to get those picks, but there's going to be a response to this that won't make anything better for Chicago, but will try and prevent this in the future.
Yeah. And I mean, I just keep thinking, like, if they had that pick with the way things have gone now, you've got 6 picks in the top. I think it'd be 101 because they would have been 101. I mean, that's a big difference than 5. I mean, just because you look at the holes that we've talked about when we've talked draft and free agency, it's like that just gives you another crack that, now, we feel like we can go get a young center, or we can go get a wide receiver that we like, that we think can turn into a wide receiver 3 and do something like that. It just gives you so much more flexibility. And trade wise, if you want, if you have that extra 3rd and you're sitting at 57 and someone's dropped to 45, let's just say, I don't know the math, but we could use that 3rd to jump up and get them. It just, that's where the killer of losing it is really getting that extra player or using it to trade up and not lose future assets when maybe the draft next year is better.
Or even just player trades, right? Like, if you have those 2 compensatory picks, are they more aggressive for Max Crosby? I mean,
yes, very
pull it out as a possibility. Same thing with, we just talked about Josh Sweat. Like, be more willing to give up my 2nd round pick or whatever for Sweat if I know I got an extra 3rd this year and an extra 3rd the following year. But instead, those resources are a little more strained, and you don't have a pick between the 4th and the 7th rounds at this point.
Do you have any hope at all that, like, when they go to this meeting and they talk about it, and these owners are scared of Ryan Poles and being accused of being called a racist, essentially? Because I'm with you, Lauren. Like, I don't think they're going to handle the pushback very well. That any hope at all that the Bears get compensatory picks in the 27 and 28 draft and they correct it for next year, or kind of out of sight, out of mind until it happens?
That's the only possibility. There is 0 chance they get a 3rd round pick this year. Like, the draft order is set. So that, but if maybe that would be better in Ryan Poles' eyes if he doesn't love this draft class depth. Like, maybe he'd prefer to have him in 27 and 28, as much as he's not going to publicly admit that up to that point. But yeah, I wonder if there's some kind of way they can make something right or make it good for the Bears. But it would be weird to like throw it 2 years ahead. But I mean, it's better than nothing.
The owners meeting is scheduled for March 29th through April 1st. So that is technically before the draft. I know, like you said, the draft order is set, but it is 3 weeks before the draft. So I mean, maybe we see something as we've talked.
All right, let's take our last break here when we get back. Let's talk about the moves that have happened in the division. A big one, a quarterback competition that will now be happening in the NFC North up in Minnesota, how that affects the Bears. All that and more next year on the Bears Squad Show. All right, Adam, I'll start with you here on this one. Kyler Murray goes to the Minnesota Vikings, a move that felt inevitable. I know Ian Rappaport, I think it was the way he framed it was the Vikings are still hopeful that J.J. McCarthy will win that job and stop Kyler Murray from being the quarterback this year for the Vikings. But how do you feel about this move for them and how it affects the Bears now going into 26?
I mean, to me, it doesn't really affect the Bears. I think Murray will win the job because I want to say he's not taking that gig unless he's basically assured he's going to at least get the first chance to start opening the season. I don't think it makes the Vikings a whole lot better. I don't think, Kyler Murray doesn't scare me as a division rival fan base. So, me personally, I want to see McCarthy win, and I'm a Michigan fan. I like JJ. He grew up not too far from where I live right now. So I would like to see him win and see him have some success, but obviously not enough success to deplant the Bears at the top.
Lauren, do you feel the same way? Or
Yeah, well, Kyler scares the heck out of me in that system, right? That like if there's ever a fit where Kyler Murray could go somewhere and resurrect his career and start playing well, it's in a very quarterback-friendly system with Kevin O'Connell that can utilize his mobility and his legs very well and lean on a running game there. And then, you also have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson for now as big weapons for him there. So, like, I think I was on a Vikings podcast earlier this offseason, and he was basically like, which quarterback outcome for the Vikings would scare you the most? Like, what do you least want to see? And it was Kyler Murray for sure. Like, there weren't a lot of other quarterback options that would scare you that much for them, right. I think Aaron Rodgers would have been a fun storyline, but like, yeah, I don't worry that like, all of a sudden the Vikings are going to be a 13-win team and run away with it. Like They just had to shed a bunch of their talent on defense, and they're kind of overcoming some mistakes from their GM that they just fired. But like, I do think he's the scariest quarterback option they could have given me this season. And I think their offense, I think he'll win the starting job most likely as long as he can stay healthy. That's probably the bigger factor there. And I think they'll be scarier and more dangerous with Kyler Murray than what we've seen from J.J. McCarthy up to this point.
I mean, when the schedule comes out in like May or whatever it was, I think there's a very real possibility that one of our first reactions is, there's a good chance you're seeing two different quarterbacks play for the Vikings this year when the Bears play them. Like, I agree, Kyler wins the job out of camp, most likely, but he always gets hurt, and there's always something with him. So it's very possible that he's in there once, and if they're not winning, they'll flip to JJ. And they might go back and forth this year as they try to figure this thing out. I mean, look, it was a good team last year with poor quarterback play. So you think Kyler does raise their ceiling for sure on this roster. And I tend to agree with you, Lauren, where like if someone's going to figure out Kyler Murray, it's going to be Kevin O'Connell. Like it kind of feels in a way he's gotten some Kyle Shanahan vibes as well. Now, I don't know with what we saw with Daniel Jones in Indianapolis and then Sam Darnold in Seattle, if it's maybe Kevin O'Connell doesn't deserve all the credit and those guys are just better at this point in their careers than where they were in previous stops. But I think it's intriguing. Like it does change the dynamic of the division a little bit, that you now have 3 number 1 overall picks who are going to all be in the NFC North. So I'm intrigued by it, but I don't think it kind of, as you said, Adam, I don't think it stops the Bears from, being a division winner next year or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know how much Kyler Murray loves football. I mean, you just watch him and the way he reacts during games and post press conferences and all this stuff. He just doesn't seem like he cares. And we all know about the video game thing that, you just don't play video game. You just couldn't get football to the front of his mind. It felt like in Arizona ever. He had that one stretch. Remember where he was like, holy cow, this is the first overall pick we thought. And then it kind of just disappeared again. And it's never even kind of shown up again. So that's where I'm just like, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. You got to prove it to me. I do agree with you guys that Kevin O'Connell does make it more interesting. And I think the fact that Sean McVay and the Rams said, hey, if you don't go get a starting job somewhere, we'll take you. You can be the backup to Matt Stafford and maybe hopefully be the predecessor to him when he does retire. I think that's interesting. But again, I just question how much Kyler actually loves the sport of football.
I agree. And also, like, if there's ever a situation that's going to force him to go all in on football, right? It's you're on a 1-year deal in Minnesota and you're trying to resurrect your career. Like, it makes sense that, he gets the big contract in Arizona, and maybe that's when you put in cruise control and coast a little bit. But now all of a sudden there's some real external pressure of like, oh, this is real. You gotta put up or shut up at this point. That man, it's a great situation for him to have to put up or shut up.
Yeah.
And to your point, Joe, about Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold, I think about how those guys both came from teams with some instability in the coaching staff and not always great supporting casts, and they come to Minnesota and have much better coaching and supporting casts. And then Daniel Jones goes to Indianapolis. I guess wasn't amazing, but I think it was better than what he had in New York, and certainly Darnold in Seattle was having better than what he had in New York also. So I think much of this is about like not just getting coached up and Kevin O'Connell fixing them, but them just like being with organizations that are more stable and successful and having a better supporting cast. Like we're talking about with quarterbacks coming out of the draft too. Like it matters so much where they land just as much as how talented they are. And so those quarterbacks come to Minnesota, find some stability, then go elsewhere to other teams that have stability, and no wonder they play better. And so you worry about Kyler Murray, right? Not coached with a great staff in Arizona, comes to Minnesota, finds some stability. And if his next stop is another team that's decent with the coaching staff and supporting cast, he can keep being good. But if his next stop is the New York Jets with their, whatever they're going to be, then he's not going to get any better. So it's so much about fit and placement than it is just talent these days.
I mean, he did say that somehow, even though he grew up in Texas, that he was a Vikings fan, and he cried when Brett Favre threw that interception. I know the Oilers, Kyler's in that range where like the Texans were kind of new still, but the Cowboys were there. But somehow he's a Vikings fan apparently, so maybe that motivates him as well, being their quarterback.
I'd love to get his thoughts on Corey Wooten's sack on Brett Favre. If you called that one too.
Anything else from the North stand out? We're just like this is a very good for the Bears. This is very bad for the Bears. Anything the Lions, Vikings, or Packers did? Adam, for you, maybe the Gary trade or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too surprised by the Rashawn Gary trade getting a little more expensive and hadn't put up the numbers that, I think Packers fans had hoped, especially when Micah Parsons was on the field. I look at what do the Lions do at left tackle? I mean, do they bring someone in, maybe a right tackle, and swing Sewell over to the left side where he played at Oregon? What do you do there? I think that's a big hole that Taylor Decker leaves when, they couldn't come to an agreement on his contract. So I'm interested to see how they patch that up there on their offensive line. That offensive line is good, but they are getting a little bit older. And now you lose your left tackle that's been there, and he's been injured a little bit. But how do you fill that hole permanently if you're Detroit? I think it's something I'm watching.
You don't have faith in Larry Borum coming in there and winning that job?
No, not at all. I couldn't remember while I was talking. I'm like, I know there's an ex-Bear that just went there, and I couldn't come up with the name. That's it. Larry Borum. No, Larry Borum does not scare me. He's on the same par as now I'm going to forget the name, the center, that Sam Mustipher. That's the equal. Like if they got Mustipher and Borum, they'd probably go there and be great and just destroy the Bears non-pass rush.
Maybe they'll trade for Kieran, because I know you pointed this out, Lauren, that Ryan Poles did not mention him yesterday at all.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a guard at this point. They're just putting him in the tackle. But like big picture with the NFC North, like I look around, we talked earlier about, did the Bears get better or worse or stay the same? And I understand, I think it's reasonable to have some trepidation or fear of like, it doesn't feel like the Bears have gotten that much better up to this point. But I look around the rest of the NFC North, and it's like, show me the NFC North team that got a lot better through free agency so far. Like I think everybody mostly kind of stayed the same or went backwards. Like Green Bay, sure, Hargrave I think will be a better fit there and be more productive in Green Bay. Like that could be a sneaky good fit for them on the defensive line. But like swap Quay Walker for Zaire Franklin, linebacker, like maybe it's a slight upgrade, but it's not really changing much for me. And like the cornerback Benjamin St. Juste, like not really an upgrade for them. They didn't do much else there in Green Bay, and they don't have a first-round pick this year or next year to get better. The Lions lost their left tackle, lost their center. They signed Cade Mays from the Panthers, who could be maybe a slight upgrade, but if anything, kind of neutral there. Didn't really do much different on their defense. They got Pacheco to replace David Montgomery. Like, is that a big upgrade? Not so much. And then Minnesota, like we already talked about, they lost Jonathan Allen, they lost Hargrave. They're trying to maybe trade Jonathan Grenard. Like, I think Kyler Murray can be a huge upgrade to that offense potentially if it all works out. But like, they haven't made, outside of James Pierre, the cornerback, like they haven't made a big splash addition either. So it just kind of feels like everybody in the NFC North is mostly kind of status quo, swap some guys out in and there. And there's, you could look at, for the Bears, Coby Bryant being a slight upgrade, for the Packers, Javon Hargrave being a slight upgrade, for the Lions, Cade Mays. Like, each team has like a spot where they probably got better, and then everybody else is kind of just rearrange. I don't say rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. They're not sinking ships, but they're just kind of moving things around and keeping things where they were.
Real quick, what's the thoughts around the Bears on Jedrick Wills that comes in? That the tackle that's been injured a lot with Cleveland was a former first top 10 pick, I think he was. So what's the feeling there, real quick, before we get out of here?
I mean, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. Like, it's not like Poles talked yesterday about how it's basically just gonna be a left tackle competition, and that's when he didn't mention Kieran's name at all in the 3 tackles that he talked about. But between Theo, Jedrick, and then the other Braxton Jones, that's who I'm looking for. I was like, who is the tackle I'm thinking of? It's an interesting room. It's not could you find something positive there? I think the answer actually feels like yes to me, that between the 3 of them, that someone can win that job easily and perform well. I think the worst thing would be that they're all kind of the same and no one really stands out. And then we have kind of a rotation again for the Bears at left tackle. But I'm intrigued by it just because, like, there was top 10 talent, but there's so many injuries. What didn't play football last year at all, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's just, it was a surprise that they made that move, but I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah, totally worth the swing for the fences. But I still come away feeling like left tackle, it's easy to worry about it because it's like, who's going to be the starter and all that stuff. But I think back to last year, and like, Braxton started the first 4 weeks of the season. Theo then started like 6 or 8, and then Ozzie started the rest. And like, even though Braxton wasn't great and Theo wasn't great either, like, I don't know that there was a single game where left tackle is what cost the Bears a win there, right? Like, it's been manageable enough, even with those guys at mediocre levels last season, for them to get by with them there. And in theory, Braxton Jones will be healthier and play a little bit better. In theory, Theo Benedette will be a little bit more developed and better. And so, like, I kind of feel it feels like a weird luxury. There's like a PTSD to be like, oh, don't trust the left tackle position. But like, in theory, any of those guys should be good enough to get by. Like, if that's your weak link on the offensive line, you can survive there. But if Bradbury is giving you trouble and your left tackle is giving you trouble, that's when it becomes more of an issue.
All right, that will do it for this episode of the Bears Squad Show. We'll be back with you guys, myself, Lauren, and Taylor, on Tuesday next week, and then this crew back Friday next week, as well as we start to get now closer and closer to the NFL draft, just a little over a month away at this point. So that will do it for this episode of the Bears Squad Show. Talk to you guys next week. Peace.